Today we're going to be looking at Colourpop in the color turquoise. So first thing you may notice is that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12, but I just want to say that that is not synonymous with hair levels. Since I do different video clips and pictures and such throughout the video, the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. 1 is pink, turquoise leans kind of on the warmish blue side, so I wanted to see how that would look over a pink. 2 is a cool gray, 3 is a natural red, 4 is black, and then 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. These are human hair swatches, but they are not virgin hair swatches except for the number 4 black swatch. The rest have been chemically colored, bleached, or treated at some point in their existence. So to start, I will take the color directly from the container and I will apply it to the top of each swatch. And then some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. So please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly turn out for you.
Sliding doors, just wanna know you more. I hope you wanna be with somebody, spending all of the night moonwalking, and with the view she could see her building. Try to tell her I know I feel it. Keep me floating, I'm on my back. Slow me down when I'm living fast.
For the diluted section, we're going to do a 4:1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of our color to 4 parts diluter. Now, if you're not sure what diluter is, I usually just quickly say that it's essentially something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye. Usually each brand will sell their own version of a diluter. I haven't checked for Colourpop actually, they might not have one, but most brands do. And you can use that to help keep the same consistency for the color, but to keep things fair between all of my videos, I just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. So I like to let these sit for about 3 hours so that they can really fully absorb the color. I will then rinse it out, and when it's dry, I'll meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So this color turned out a little bit different in a couple ways than I think I was expecting. Not that my expectations necessarily mean anything. There might be other people who are also expecting it to be a little different, but I think my expectations come from having done quite a few other colors, and especially turquoisey colors. This is just a little bit more green and a little bit more muted and smoky than I think I was expecting compared to my other like turquoisey colors. That's not necessarily a bad thing, just putting that out there for anyone who is looking for the variety of, turquoises that you can get on the market. So number 1 was originally pink. The direct eye portion, I would say fully covered. In this lighting, it doesn't look quite as blue, but when I did the close-ups in natural lighting, this swatch was quite cool toned. I think the pink canceled out some of the greenish in the color. So the diluted section is a little bit more iffy. I see a lot more pink coming through in some spots, so I would say if you wanted it to be diluted, don't dilute it as much as I did if you're trying to cover a pink, because it almost did cover, it's just some spots did not. 2 was the gray. That one is not too different from the lighter swatches. Sometimes it can be very different. It's probably a little bit lighter and maybe a touch more cool toned than the blonde swatch, but overall it's not a huge difference. 3 was the natural red. That usually kind of turns out maybe something like 5 or 6 or something in that family. So on the direct eye on both of these, it looks quite green. And interestingly, it looks probably a little bit more green on the number 3, but the number 3 also looks darker. Some blues and turquoisey colors do tend to look more and more green the darker your hair looks. So keep that in mind. The bottom half almost looks a little bit more neutral because it had a little bit more red in it. It almost looks like a regular brown now instead of a reddish color, which again, I'm thinking that the greenish color in the dye canceled out some of the red. But as I always say, do a strand test because you never know how it's going to turn on your hair. And speaking of which, because my swatches are not virgin, they will take color a little bit better than virgin hair will. And this wasn't quite as pigmented as I was expecting. When I did the diluted section, it lightened up very quickly. So while it did cover some of my darker swatches, I would say be a little bit more cautious of that if you have virgin hair, because even if it does take, it can often wash out very quickly because virgin hair tends to struggle a little bit to take semi-permanent color. So anyway, 4 was the black. I don't see a difference on number 4. 5 was the darker brown. I do see a difference on the top versus the bottom. And similar to number 3, the color on top almost gives it like a nearly blackish look. The top is definitely darker, but it still has a more natural-ish look. I guess I can't totally say that the top looks like a brown necessarily, but it's not light enough to where I can see a ton of green. Probably in direct sunlight you would see a lot more green coming through, but in more low lighting it just looks like a very dark hair color. I would say 6 is where you can really start to see more of the color coming through, and then obviously onward it just gets a little bit more saturated. Then I think my personal opinion, number 8 is where it starts to look a little bit less green, with the number 12, the tone swatch, being the least green. So if you don't really like green tones in your hair, I'd recommend making sure you get as much of the yellow out, because the yellow mixing with the blue in itself is going to make it look a little bit more green as well. But I'll also say that there's not a huge difference between 11 and 12. Truly is just a slight undertone shift. And then as for the diluted section, I think it looks the best in my opinion on the lighter swatches 11 and 12, but you still get a pretty smooth consistent color starting on number 9, which just again starts to look a little bit more green than it does turquoisey. And I think I want to compare this to a color that isn't quite as smoky, so you can see what I mean when I say that the Colourpop is a little bit more smoky and a little bit green as well. So our first comparison is going to be Arctic Fox in the color Aquamarine. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So first bit I want to say is that I used to do a different numbering system for the swatches, so that's why the numbers are different. And I also used to do 2 separate diluted sections, so this is diluted and then I would dilute it again. That's why the swatches look a little bit different, but hopefully you can see, especially looking at maybe like 11 and 12, the difference in undertone and saturation. So the Platinum Blonde Aquamarine does lean a little bit more green than the toned version, but compared to the Colourpop Turquoise, it looks quite blue. I think from where I'm sitting, the slightly darker swatches I think look a little bit more similar to the Aquamarine, but even on those swatches you can just see a little bit more softness in the Colourpop one. The Aquamarine is pretty pigmented, so I will link that video down below if you're looking for something that is better for a little bit darker of hair, but again it should turn a little bit more green than it would on lighter swatches. Then the other color I wanted to compare this to is Lunar Tides in the color Smokey Teal. So this is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. Now I wanted to compare this because they both have that smokiness, which it's really in the name for Lunar Tides, and I wanted to make it more apparent that it is like a slightly more muted color. But obviously the Smoky Teal leans much more blue in undertone as well, which is why I kept saying that the Colourpop one does lean a little bit more green than I think I was personally expecting. But if you are looking for something that's even more green than the Colourpop, I would say the next in line that I have that's still kind of like a greenish greenish, little bit of blue, would be Lime Crime in the color Sea Witch. It's a little bit more saturated. It's not quite as smoky, but I would say that was the next closest if we were looking more at the greenish swatches that I have. But I do think the undertone is really pretty for the Colourpop one. Kind of has like an oceany mermaid vibe, I would say. Now I'd like to look at the before and after clips. Those, as well as everything after this point in the video, is all going to be done in natural lighting.
Sliding doors, just wanna know you more. I hope you wanna be with somebody. Spending all of the night moonwalking, and with the view she could see her building. Try to tell her I know I feel it. Keep me floating, I'm on my back. Slow me down when I'm living fast.
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very, very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.